Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Baldur's Gate on PC. I've spoken many times before on this show about games based directly on the Dungeons & Dragons license, and there were certainly ones that chronologically came before today's topic. But for me, this is the one that finally married my love for video games and my love for tabletop games. Today I discuss 1998's Baldur's Gate. There are going to be a lot of moving parts for this review, dear listener, but I will do my best to keep this as comprehensive as possible. Baldur's Gate was originally one of BioWare's early games that they developed, and was published by both Interplay and Black Isle Studios. So the folks that had their hands in the Fallout series, Dragon Age and Mass Effect games, and Wasteland games had at some point been developing a CRPG, or computer role-playing game, for the grandfather of all tabletop role-playing games currently on the market. Baldur's Gate takes place in one specific area of the Forgotten Realms game setting for D&D, a rules adjustment to the first and second edition Dungeons & Dragons that was first published in 1987. So BioWare did not have to invent any lore for this game. They merely had to adopt and adapt what already existed. The Forgotten Realms was first created by Canadian author and lifelong public librarian Ed Greenwood, as far back as 1967, and he later became noticed by creators Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson sometime after they had formed TSR Game Studio to publish D&D, which itself was an adaptation of the wargame rules of a system called Chainmail. The early D&D players were all concentrated in Wisconsin, Michigan, and southern Canada, and it was easy enough for Greenwood to get his setting noticed among these early groups and their homebrew publications. The Forgotten Realms is a setting where anything can happen, and often does. And if it exists in fantasy somewhere, then it exists here. Fun fact, if any listeners out there have played this game and met a character in red with a massive hat named Elminster, then you have met Ed Greenwood, sort of, as that is his self-insert character across the whole setting. The plot of the game revolves around the character you create discovering that they are something called a ball spawn, but I cannot accurately explain what that means and why that matters, unless I do a bit of nerding out history, so settle in. During the years before Baldur's Gate the video game picks up in the in-world timeline, there was an event that was written about in the mid-1990s called the Time of Troubles, in which the gods of the setting were forced to walk around in their mortal avatar forms. Two gods named Bane and Merkel attempted to steal a powerful divine magic called the Tablets of Fate, see as Ed Greenwood's ideas, from the over-god Ao. Yes, even the gods have a god. As punishment for their neglect, hedonism, infighting, and general ignoring of the land and the people who they were charged with protecting and shepherding, Ao got big-time pissed off and kicked everyone out of the divine realm and forced them to live among the very people that they had abandoned for so long. Man, don't you wish that sort of shit happened in real life? Might actually fix some things on Earth and show a number of major world religions how to stop getting high off their own bullshit, or at least force them to admit the chaos and evil that we are steeped in is not some sort of divine plan, and maybe publicly expose various leaders for the charlatan shitheels that they are. But I digress. Anyway, now forced to be mortal, the gods learn nothing, of course, because what are gods but the composite delusions of human hopes and wishes? For the most part, they decided to act contrite long enough for the overgod to decide he couldn't run everything himself and call them back home. But hardly all of them, as the celestial battles were brought to the mortal realm. Many gods died during this time, and new ones ascended from mortal stock. But for our purposes, we need to speak about the god Baal, spelled B-H-A-A-L. Baal was the god of murder, because why not have one of those? Many real-world human gods over the centuries have existed to cover this concept. Baal was definitely an evil god, feared by his worshippers and the common people alike. Why not wipe them out, I hear you ask, since this is fantasy? Fuck if I know. Why not wipe out the KKK? If you have an answer for that, then same reason here. Baal himself was killed by an evil mortal named Cyric, with the aid of a magic sword during this time. Because, of course, there were one of those. And when the Celestial Order was restored, Cyric, who had was put into the divine cosmology to cover all the evil gods slain during the Time of Troubles. However, Baal had foreseen his death and had spent a few years raping everything he can get his hands on to have his seed planted across the fantasy world, hoping to be resurrected in one of his own half-mortal offspring who would become known as Ballspawn. Now, is everybody clear on what I said? Yes, no, maybe, couldn't give a shit less? Too bad, we're moving forward. Rewind the last bit if you're lost. Your ridiculously rolled pile of stats, obscure wargame rules, and zero personality is ejected onto the isometric landscape of the realms into a place called Candlekeep, which is the world's biggest and most exclusive library, watched over by specialized monks who hoard their knowledge of the world and will only let people in as long as they provide a unique, one-of-a-kind book, a steep price to pay in a world before the invention of the printing press, and who had barely had the water wheel in technology. Which brings to mind the following. In a world where magic permeates everything and the gods are real and walk the land from time to time, why would anyone bother transcribing any information by hand when you could wave a wand and produce 1,000 of the fucking manuscripts in seconds? Or anything else? Why does magic replace or marry with technology? Who knows? Anyway, you are the adopted child of the monk Orion, and nobody talks about your origins. Your best friend lives here too, the horridly chipper and annoying Imoen. And you wander around getting pushed around by guards and doing small side quests and at least one assassination attempt on your life that are trying to teach you the actual mechanics of the game itself. Bonus fact, if you listen to the chanters hanging out in the courtyard of the keep, they are actually hinting at the plot of the game for you. But you and Gorion are setting out that night for points elsewhere, and you must be ready. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as you get a half-mile outside the keep, you both ambushed by the villain of the game named Saravok and his powerful cohorts, who kill Gorion, but not before a magical light and sound spectacular goes off that knocks you out. You come to in the morning with Imoen standing over you, your first party member, and, well, shit, I guess we're stuck with her. Your only other idea of what to do or where to go is to find a place called the Friendly Arm Inn to the north to meet with friends of your adopted father. Yeah, maybe these people I've never met and didn't know about will have answers as to why I saw my adopted father get murdered a half-mile away from the only home I've ever known. Which, by the way, they won't let you back in despite knowing full damn well who you are because Gorion is not with you. The fact that he's dead being damned, unless you happen to have that unique book door fee, which of course you don't. So, off to adventure. That's where the majority of the plot of Baldur's Gate takes place, trying to connect the dots between major set pieces while following the trail of breadcrumbs left by Saravok's machinations to cause the Sword Coast region of the Forgotten Realms, where all this takes place, to collapse into abject chaos. The best part of this game is that this is a free roam open world game long before those types of games became popular. You absolutely do not have to follow the main plot unless you want to, or run out of other things to do, or unless you stumble across plot threads out of order. The developers got that part of the translating tabletop D&D correct. Non-linear gameplay directed by the players, not the storyteller. What improv folks would call yes and. Baldur's Gate is crammed full of random encounters with monsters, odd NPCs, wondrous treasure, and other characters to recruit into your party, which can hold 5 extra folks besides your player character, which can vary your tactics greatly. Do you want a party ruled by sneaky thieves, grinning wizards, divine spellcasters, or hard-hitting warriors? Well, that choice is yours. There's even a canonical party to recruit, if you're into that sort of thing. Many of those side quests can yield mighty weapons and armor, new spells to learn, and some truly funny dialogue to uncover. And I'm not kidding about that part. It's been over 20 years now since I first played this game, and one particular encounter has stuck with me all these years, living rent-free in my head. If you can find him, you will encounter a lone hermit in the many wilderness maps in the game who has been asking your character a series of self-righteous bullshit questions so that he can sound all philosophical. If you let the conversation go on long enough, your character can respond with the following gem of prolonged line. Ahem. Okay, I've just about had my fill of riddle asking, quest assigning, insult throwing, pun hurling, hostage taking, iron mongering, smart arsed fools, freaks, and felons who continually test my will, mettle, strength, intelligence, and most of all, patience. If you've got a straight answer anywhere in that mental head of yours, I better hear it pretty damn quick, or I'm going to take a large blunt object, roughly the size of Elminster and his hat, and stuff it lengthwise into the crevice of your being so seldom seen that even the denizens of the nine hells themselves wouldn't touch it with a 20-foot rusty halberd. Have I made myself perfectly clear? Goddamn, that line never fails to make me smile. And you just don't get writing like that these days. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah, the main plot. So things start going even more sideways for your character when assassins by the handful begin trying to kill them, often calling them ball spawn, long before they know what that is. And all the swords and axes within 50 miles begin to break due to a mysterious weakness. It turns out the mines that supply iron to all the Sword Coast near the medieval megacity that is Baldur's Gate have been turning out rotten ore, and you go to investigate. The party soon begins hearing rumors that the mines are haunted and workers are fleeing. But in truth, the party finds kobolds, creatures in the D&D canon that look like two-legged scaly chihuahuas, have been spreading some sort of alchemical poison on the iron to make it brittle when turned into steel and then weapons. And the person who is controlling the kobold is hiding deep in the mine and has ties to Saravok. This is the first thread of the main plot, and each of the plot threads behind warlords of various races that Saravok has recruited into his grand scheme to become the Duke/Warlord of the region. With each warlord that falls before your blades, your character has bizarre dreams the following night, and wakes with new powers that they did not start the game with. I guess there's something to that ball spawn thing after all. Through plot contrivance, the player character and their party are arrested for murders that were committed by the Saravok, and while about to be executed, they are rescued by the last remaining man with half a brain cell in all of Baldur's Gate. And they soon find the whole plot revolves around a manufactured iron crisis to weaken the regions between Baldur's Gate and the nearby nation of Again, just stick with me here, I know the names are confusing. Two nations that already hate each other, in order to start a war where Saravok can assume the mantle as the new Lord of Murder, provided, of course, that he has killed off enough of his sibling Ballspawn and caused enough chaos for his dead deity daddy to notice him. This leads to the final showdown, where the party confronts Saravok in a hidden temple to Baal. Who will prevail? Well, the party, most likely. Considering there was a sequel, you can safely assume that they do. Under the programming hood, Baldur's Gate had a lot going for it that would affect many CRPGs and RPGs to follow. A reputation system, tracking of time and day and night cycles, ambushes while camping, and the quote-unquote fog of war system that hides enemies and the landscape from the player until they investigate closer. There is even the option to play the game single-player or multiplayer, something almost unheard of in 1998. It would also produce a character that would become a minor geek culture phenomenon, Minsk, the human ranger that had taken one too many hits to the head, enthusiastically voiced by veteran actor Jim Cummings, and Minsk's animal companion Boo, the miniature giant space hamster and moral support animal. These characters have gone on to be referenced in comics, other games, and completely unrelated properties to D&D. However, upon the game's release, sales were expected to bomb by the game's publisher Interplay. I can understand that. The game is steeped in deep, deep lore of a particular setting within perhaps the biggest hallmark game of geeks everywhere, something that in 1998 you just didn't casually announce in social circles without getting some level of ostracism. But to Interplay's surprise, the game was a huge hit, likely due to the strength of the D&D license, and a development team relying on fan feedback during development. By June of 1999, it had sold nearly 700,000 copies and continued to be the bestseller well into the year 2000, bolstered by sales of the expansion pack, early D&C for the young folks out in the audience, called Tales of the Sword Coast. The game received near-perfect awards from reviewers and critics that year, with 9 out of 10s and 4 out of 5 star ratings floating the game into guaranteed sequel territory. The game has been re-released a number of times through the years, either as bundled packs, digitally on most online game sales platforms, ported to recent console generations, and was even remastered by Beamdog Studios under the title of the quote unquote enhanced edition, with new characters, classes, and even a new story that links this game directly to its sequel. Its successful release even contributed to the success and style of its companion games like Icewind Dale and Planescape Torment. And holy shit, I bought them all, especially Baldur's Gate, multiple times. As you can probably guess, dear listener, I love this game. This is another foundational game for me. The first that was able to, at least in the capacity that developers had in 1998, properly translate the experience of playing a tabletop game of imagination with friends into a fully realized world to explore. I took a lot from this title. From writing the game design, Baldur's Gate taught me a lot about how to run a game, how to build a game, and how to write for a game. It moved me from the plots to the execution of JRPGs to Western RPGs, and made me a fan of franchises completely unrelated to the subject matter of the game, but aping its style and play. Even among games I really enjoyed, it has been rare for me to pursue titles across multiple iterations and generations just to play it again and again as time and technology moves on, leaving the original programming locked forever to increasingly old hardware and software. I mean, if it had not been for dedicated programmers and fans, this game would have been forever locked to Windows 95. And if you still have an old dinosaur of a computer running that operating system stuffed in a corner and attic of your house, I applaud your dedication and foolishness in equal measure. Baldur's Gate joins the likes of Dead Space, Resident Evil 4, and Skyrim in my personal pantheon of game gods, who I've played over and over across decades now, bought the remasters and definitive editions just to have a little more time in those worlds. The game has sold millions of copies the world over, made many fans, greatly influenced the game industry, and for a brief and shining moment, made me happy. No easy feat in that, let me tell you. If you haven't at least tried it, I implore you to give it a shot. It may or may not be your thing, but the world and vistas it will open for you to explore are like none other, even with the dated look and user interface shortcomings that time and technology have made pronounced. I mean, if you didn't like old games, at least a little bit, would any of us be here? Of course not. You'd be playing only the freshest, latest gate releases for a few minutes until you tossed your new toys aside with boredom, freaked out over first world gamer problems, and made desperate excuses for abusive industry executives, possibly while tongue polishing Bobby Kotick's sweaty asshole. See, there I go again, making friends and influencing people. Baldur's Gate was a game like no other, and while many emulate it, none can truly imitate it. It is a reminder of what came before, a time capsule of goodness, and even though it is a licensed brand from a corporate entity, with love and care, it can be a beacon of light in a sometimes very dark landscape. Go for the eyes, indeed. Thank you for listening.